Okay, hello, good afternoon. Let's start. Let's see. Last time you and I talked, we were talking about naturalism and explaining meaning in terms of causal connections. Oh, and it looks so difficult to explain how there can be such a thing as going right or wrong in your use of a word in terms of causal connections in the way that Fodor and Retschke are trying to do. And then I guess, though I wasn't here, Justin was talking through logic and conversation last time, is that right? Okay. And now we're on to Wittgenstein and looking at the way, trying to look directly at how language works, how right and wrong come into the use of language. It's quite a long set of selections from Wittgenstein in the reader. Have you guys all looked at the selections? Can you put your hand up if you've looked at the selections and found them difficult? Pretty straightforward? Can you? Okay. The thing is, this is very rich, this set of selections from Wittgenstein, but there is basically just 1 point, maybe 2 points he is making all the way through. It's a very deep point that he's making. It has a lot of resonance for everything else in philosophy. And it takes a little while to get it. And what I'm going to do today is just try and state what I think his main points are in these selections. But I think for philosophy, this stuff is, for most of us, the nearest you get to Shakespeare. I think for most, you know how when you're reading Shakespeare that it's kind of distracting because every second line you read is a famous quotation. The Wittgenstein is kind of like that, right? I mean, it's hard to read it because practically every other line is something that's been quoted 1,000,000 times. But you've got to read it. It is so rich. And while I will try to say what I think the main point is, that single point that he's banging on at about all the way through, it's developed with such richness and such interesting examples and strange ideas all through those sections. Okay, so I want to start out by looking at the question, when we're all using a language, when we're all talking the same language, we all talk, in some sense, we talk in pretty much the same way. We all use the language in the same way. And the question is, how does that come about? What keeps us all together in our use of the language we all share? And Wittgenstein's own positive account of how language is working has got something to do with the notion of a custom or the notion of a practice. But this is a difficult notion. It's a little bit like Frege's notion of sense. It's a very evocative notion, this notion of custom or practice that he uses. And it's clearly very important, but it is difficult to explain exactly what's going on here. So in the last two sections today, I'll try and set out what the idea is. But first of all, consider the question, what keeps us all together in our use of language? Suppose that you're trying to teach me the use of English. Suppose that I'm a child, you're just trying to tell me about how the numbers work. You're trying to tell me how the signs for the numerals work. And so you're trying to teach me what it means for one number to come right after another. You're going to explain to me the notion of the successor of a natural number. So how do you do it? Well, the natural idea is you say, well, look, 1 comes right after 0, 2 comes right after 1, 3 comes right after 2, 4, then it's 5, 6, 7, and I'm listening to you doing this. And then at a certain point, something happens, and you say to me, now what number comes after 5? And I've got to say 6. And if we both got that, then there's some basic agreement in our use of the number words. Yeah, we need something like that if we're all going to be using the language the same way, that we all agree in which numbers come after which. That's okay? So how does it work? I mean, you're saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and after a bit, I say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But how did that happen? Well, the natural idea is something like, well, I figured out, look, you're adding 1. That's what she's doing. She's adding 1. Every time she just adds 1. So you think of it like that. It's a little bit like one of these brain teasers. Let's see if I can. So suppose I do this. Suppose I write. Let me see if I can do this in real time. Suppose I write 2, 9. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm running out of mental space to do this. I'm going to take a simpler example. Suppose I do 2, 5, 10, 17. What comes next? Sorry? 26. Very good. 26? Yeah, why do you say 26? Can you make that explicit?
I can make it into the formula n squared plus 1.
N squared plus 1, right. Okay. I was originally going to do n cubed plus 1, but I kind of ran out of mental space at about 3. But, okay. So n squared plus 1 is easier. But okay, look, so now you know that it's 25 next, right? So I just taught you how to do that. Right? I just gave you a bunch of examples, and you brilliantly figured out the general rule, right? So now you can go 2, 5, 10, 17, 25. What's next? When I say 25, I mean 26. What's next? 37, very good. Okay. So you go 37, I go 37, right? So the natural way to think of what's going on with a child is learning successor is you're going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And after a bit, the child says, wait a minute, I get it. She's doing x plus 1. That's it, I can do that. So then now you know what to do next, right? So that's what keeps us all together. In this case, the reason that we all agree is 37 next is we all figured out that's the rule. That's the way that's the way the series works. And in this case, when you're learning the meaning of the word successor, someone's explaining the meaning of successor to you, and you just figure out what the general rule is. And once you figure out what the general rule is, we're all working in the same way, because when we all say successor, we all have the same general rule in our minds, right? So that's the way language works, that we all have the same rule for the use of the sign successor in our heads, and we use that to generate the series. Right, that's pretty obvious, right? Yes? Are you comfortable so far? Okay, that's the view that Wittgenstein is saying can't be right. It can't be right. And the reason it can't be right is it's got to do the work of making sure that we all generate the sequence of numbers in the same way. So we've all got to have this thing in our head, this rule in our head that we're using to generate the sequence of numbers in the same way. But now, suppose it comes apart. Suppose that it's called on to keep us together. What I mean is, suppose that you're doing your best to teach me, and we get to this part all right. You're saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm being a good student. I'm sitting there saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm rattling it off just with you. And you think, by God, he's got it. He's really got it. And you say, okay, let's do it a bit more. 21, 22, 23, and I'm going 24, 25, 26, 27. And you think, that's great. And then we carry on, and once we get up to 96, what happens is you're saying 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, and I'm going 96, 97, 104, 3, 22, 437, and you say, wait a minute, no, it was all going so well. Right, this is where I've gone off the tracks, right? So we are no longer together, right? We're not using successor in the same way anymore. So if this formula is ever going to do any work, if this thing we've got in our heads that is keeping us together ever is going to get any traction, ever is going to get any grip to pull us together, it's got to be here. You've got to be able to use this to pull me back onto the tracks, right? So that's what you're going to say to me. You say, look, just a minute. The rule was, you go, 1 plus 1 is x plus 1. That's the rule. And I say, that's right. It's x plus 1. And you say, okay, so it goes 96 plus 1 is 97. 97 plus 1. And I say, yeah, that's right. 96 plus 1, that's 97. And you say 97 plus 1, that's 98. And I say, no, no, no. 97 plus 1, that's 104. And you say, no, hang on. Let's review the situation here. And I say, I really don't know what you mean. I'm just doing the same thing I was doing before. And you say, no, you're not. And I say, well, look, I'm just adding 1. 97 plus 1, 104, 104 plus 1, that's 3. I say, I do not know why you have gone off in this weird way up here, 97, 98, 99. That's really peculiar. Why are you going all over the place like that now? Why don't you just add 1 the same way you were doing before? And you say, no, I am just adding 1. But at that point, I say, no, I don't know what's going on with you. You were doing the same thing all up here, but now here you've just gone right off the tracks. So the one place where this might really do some work and help keep us together, it actually packs up on us. And if you think about it, consider this formula in your head. This is just 3 signs, right? X, the plus sign, and 1. So what do those signs mean? How would you explain to someone what those signs mean? Suppose you were trying to explain to someone what x plus 1 means. What would you do? Could you, for example, define it? Yes? Okay, what's the definition? Right, okay, so if you could say prior in the series, right, but that just means the same thing as this, right? And I say, but this is the number prior in the series. Yeah? So you've got to explain what this means in a way that I can't just say, yeah, that's what I mean. Do you see what I mean? Yeah? So do you have such a way of explaining this? You could say, well, it's successor, or add 2 and then subtract 1. And I said, well, that's what I'm doing. I mean, the only way you have of explaining what this means is to give some examples. Right? So if you want to explain what this sign that we've all got running through our heads means, the only way you can do it is to say, look, it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the way it looks at the start is, this is what, this general formula is what's generating the series of numbers here. But actually, that's not right at all. This doesn't control what series of numbers gets generated. You can only explain this formula by giving the examples, by running through the series. So this doesn't give you any traction. It doesn't give you any friction. It doesn't give you any grip on what comes after what here. It's rather that this just gets towed along behind whatever's happening here with the examples. These examples do all the work. This only has a meaning because it's tied up to the way that you and I are generating the case by case, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So actually, if you look for the real situation as to what's going on, it's not that the teacher is going 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I have this flash of insight, and I say, I got what they're doing. It's x plus 1. It was a brain teaser, only a very simple one, so I managed to figure it out with a sudden flash of insight, and now I generate all the examples here. Rather, what goes on is this. You say, look, when you want to know what number comes after another one, here's some examples. It goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you do this for a bit. And after a while, what happens is I go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's it. This formula doesn't do any work. We just agree on the cases. There is nothing that explains why we agree in the cases. You just rattle off a whole bunch of examples, and after a while, I rattle off a whole bunch of examples, and nothing happens in the middle. I mean, if you do postulate something happening in the middle, what you find out is it can't do any work. It's just a dead sign that has to be towed along by what's happening in the particular cases. Plain enough? So we'll just agree on the cases. And this is actually quite a general phenomenon. Suppose you think of, yep.
So 1 to 10, I guess you have to take an example, but why can't you just say that, all right, I'm counting a series of 1, so at 10, you begin over again, right?
You begin over again, right?
I mean, if we had a hex system, it would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You need to take that example.
Right.
If they didn't follow you there, and then you start over again and go, 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 6, 3, 6, whatever.
And I say, that's what I'm doing. That's what I say to you. I say, I'm just starting over again. I'm just using the system.
I mean, 7 to 4, right? And you should go from 7 to 8 at least, right?
I say, no. Look, you follow the system. It goes 97, 104. And then where did that 98 come from?
Because 7 plus 1 is 8, and we haven't.
But not in this context. Here's 7 plus 1, you get 104. When you put it together. You're misapplying the system. Any form of words you use, I can use too. Because the thing is, if you ask, how does your form of words have meaning? The only way you can explain what that form of words, here's the system, you keep adding 1. The only way you can explain what those words mean is by looking back at the examples. And I say, but look, this is what it means. You see what I mean?
Yeah. I still think it's hard to think of a case where you get 1 to 10 right, and then you 1 to 9 right, and then you get a or you get the 20 right and 30 right, and then finally you get the 9 and 10.
Yeah, but I'm saying, I'm just doing the same thing. I'm not going off you're going off the tracks. Yeah. I say, this is really mad. How come you're going off the tracks? You were doing so well. You see what I mean? The form of words can't do it. And let me give another example. So suppose I'm trying to explain to you what the color words mean. So I'm going to explain to you what blue means. And I say, look, I mean, this is what people do with children. It's actually very difficult to get into children's heads, but anyway. You say, look, here's some blue things. This is blue, and this one's blue, and this one's blue, and that one's not blue. We're actually a bit short of blue things here, but if a bit short of coloured objects altogether. But picture, if you will, a whole bunch of blue things out here, right? And I'm explaining to you what the word blue means, and you say, okay, so I'm saying this is blue, and this is blue, and this is blue, and this is blue. And then after a bit, the test is, I say to you, now which ones are blue, and which ones would you say are not blue? And you say, okay, this is blue, and that over there is blue, and this one is definitely not blue. and so on, right? That's how it works. That's what's going on when you're learning a language. So what happened? How come you and I are applying the word blue to just the same objects? What went on? I gave all these examples. I said, look at this one, this one, this one, this one. And after a bit, you said, okay, I've got it. I mean, something happened, like you got an image of blue. You said, well, by blue, he means this color. And then you got the image in your head. And you say, okay, it's that image. That's what's fixing the meaning of the sign. And so now, whenever I want to know whether the word blue applies to this example or that example, what I do is I just check it matches the image, right? Something like that. You know, you listen to the person talking the language, and you try and figure out what they're saying, what they're meaning by the word. And then once you've got that, you know how to go on. You know how to use the word in other cases. But the trouble is, as before, suppose you go off the tracks. What good's the image of blue going to do? Suppose you say, what does it mean, an image of blue? Okay, you got this thing in your head. And how do you know how to bring it to bear on any particular object you see? Really, all that happens is that you say, this is blue. The teacher says, this is blue, that over there is blue, and this is not blue. And then after a bit, the people start saying, oh, this is blue, and that over there is blue, and this one is definitely not blue. And there is nothing else going on. Nothing at all. And if you think about it, suppose you're asked, well, is this cup white? What would you, now let me put it to you, what would you say? Would you say this cup was white? I put it to you, this cup is definitely white, right? Right? How do you know? I mean, how do you know the word white applies here? Is it that you've got an image, or you carry about with you like a paint sample? You know how when you in a hardware store they have paint charts. You can take away a paint chart. You have a mental paint chart, as it were. And when I say, look, now what color would you say this is? You take the image, the mental sample, the mental bit of paint, and you say, oh, that's the white, right? So, and then you say, okay, no, it's the same as that. Is that what happened? When I said, what color would you say this is? You consulted your mental sample and you said, yeah, it looks just like that. Right? But note the difficult question. How do you know you called up the right sample? How do you know that was an image of white you called up? Well, you just do know, right? You just applied the word. I mean, it's no easier to apply the word white to something in your head than it is to apply to something out there. You had to be able to, I mean, maybe you needed another mental sample. Do you see what I mean? Maybe you had 2 mental paint charts. Or maybe 3. Actually, you need 3, right? No, you need 4. Actually, you need 5. You see what I mean? Because every time you use the word white, every time you say, no, it applies to this sample, you're going to need another chart to say, well, it matches this. At some point, you're going to have to say, no, I just knew that the word white applied to that sample. And if you can do that, you might as well just have said, look, I could just apply the word white to this without any of that stuff in the mind. I just do it. So that's all that happens when you're learning color words. Whoever's teaching you applies the color words to a whole bunch of things. And after a bit, you apply the color words to a whole bunch of things. And you can just forget this stuff running through the head. It doesn't matter, it doesn't count, it doesn't do any work. That's not what keeps us together in our use of language. We generally apply the color words to just the same things as each other. We all agree that was white, that's all right. But if you ask, what is the explanation of that? How come we all agree in applying the word white in just the same cases? There is no explanation. We just do agree on the application of the word white in particular cases, and that's the end of the story. And it's natural to say, well, what is it that keeps us together? And the answer is there isn't really anything that keeps us together. We just do use these words in the same way. And it just comes to a stop there. What about this is a cube? Well, you get the same point. If I'm going to explain to you what the words for the shapes mean, you say, here are some cubes, here are some things that are not cubes. Here's how the word cube is used. What do you have to do to figure out the meaning of the word cube? Having an image of a cube in your head doesn't do any work. That's just another example of a cube for you to apply the words to. All that really matters is that we should apply the words in just the same cases. And as keeping together is just itself the fundamental fact. Everything else in human civilization depends on us all agreeing on the ways that we use words in these simple basic cases. But there is nothing that explains it. Here's Stanley Cavell explaining Wittgenstein's main point here. He says, the way it goes is we learn and teach words in certain contexts, and then we're expected, and we expect others, to be able to project them into further contexts. So once you've learned to use the word with some examples, you are then able to use the word in connection with new examples. That projection into further contexts, nothing ensures that the projection will take place. In particular, there's no grasping of universals. There's nothing like grasping the This is the collapse of civilization. There's nothing like the grasp of the general formula, x+1, grasping a book of rules, something that tells you how to use the word in particular cases. So nothing is ensuring that the projection of the use of the word into new context takes place, just as nothing ensures that you and I are going to make and understand the same projections as one another. There is nothing holding us together. That, on the whole, we do make the same projections. It is that's a matter of us sharing roots of interest and feeling, senses of humour and of significance and of fulfillment, senses of what is outrageous, of what is similar to what else, what is a rebuke, what forgiveness. We just operate in the same way in all these particular cases. We react similarly in lots of particular cases. We have a similar sense of when someone's making an assertion, when it's an appeal, when it's an explanation. Sharing between us all the whirl of organism that Wittgenstein calls forms of life. Human speech and activity, sanity and community rest on nothing more but nothing less than this. It is a vision as simple as it is difficult, and as difficult as it is, and because it is, terrifying. So everything depends, everything about ordinary social life depends on us applying the same words in the same cases. When you get down to basics, we have to agree on when you apply the word people to the same things, when you apply the word square to the same things. All these simple basic cases, when one number comes after another. We've got to agree in all those things for ordinary social life to be possible. But if you ask, what is doing it? How come we are all managing to keep together? There is nothing that is doing that. The reason it's terrifying is that when you grasp what's going on here, you see that there is nothing holding us together. at any point, we could all just drift apart, and there would be no way of pulling us together then. This scenario, where we all just drifted apart and went on in quite different ways. You say that's white, and I say that's not white, and we just can't find a basis from which to resolve the disagreement. That's always possible. It doesn't, in fact, happen. By and large, we generally do share our reactions, share our word classifications, but nothing makes that happen. That's the vision that is as difficult as it is, and because it is, terrifying. That's Wittgenstein's main point. You got that? Okay, pretty good. We could pack up. The thing is, if this is the right picture, then there's a question. How come there is such a thing as going right or wrong in your use of words? And after all, if all that's holding us together is that we apply the word in just the same cases, well, if when I say that's a cube, I apply that to a particular thing, then what makes it right or wrong when you say that's a cube? That's a basic question we've been trying to address all through this class, right? How come there is such a thing as getting it right or wrong when you apply a term to an object? Well, come on, class. We've been doing this for, I don't know, 8 weeks, 9 weeks? How come there is such a thing as getting it right or wrong when you say that's a cube? If you thought you got an image of a cube in your head, and that's what fixes the meaning of the word, that is like the sense of the word, that is the meaning of the word, then you know what it is for it to be right or wrong, right? That's a cube is true if the object matches your image. It's not true if it doesn't match your image. But what we just did was we threw out the image. We threw out anything you'd call the meaning of the term in general. So when you say that's a cube, it's not that that's true if the object matches some image you have. So what does it take for it to be true? How can there be such a thing as it being true? How can there be standards of right and wrong? Yeah. Just agreement. Yeah. It's hard to see what else it could be, isn't it? I mean, we don't have this standard, right? The image, the general formula. You'd think, well, we've got a rule book in our back of our minds, and that's what's going to mean that there's such a thing as going right or wrong. But then if we throw that out, we've thrown out any rule. And Wittgenstein seems to be saying something like what you just said, that agreement with other people is the key thing. And he certainly thinks this, that when you look for an account of what it is to go right or wrong in your use of a word, it's a mistake to look deep into the psychology of the individual, to look deep into the mind, as if somewhere in the mind there are the standards of right and wrong. That's the thing we just threw out. There aren't any standards of right and wrong set out in the mind. And this is where his thing about custom or practice comes in. And it's agreement with each other has got something to do with it. It's not obvious it's just the same thing, but it's something like you've got to look at the way other people use the sign. You can't make sense of the idea that someone is going right or wrong in their use of a sign on their own. It's only insofar as an individual's use of a sign is located in a social practice or custom of using signs that it makes sense to talk about truth or falsity. But when you say agreement, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but how would it go that it's right if you agree with everybody else and wrong if you don't?
I guess there is no, it's either you agree, you disagree, it's not really whether it's right or wrong.
Yeah, so we threw away right and wrong. Yeah, that's pretty radical. Yeah?
You just do right and wrong in the same way.
You could say it's right, you're right if you agree, and you're wrong if you disagree.
Or if you use the word right in the right way, everyone agrees that that's the right way to use it.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like a way to visualize it being blindfold everyone square.
So can you do that?
Like if you were to blindfold everyone and say, okay, or somehow like have them not see anyone else in the room and say, what's a square, to have everyone point at something.
Right.
As long as everyone's pointing at the same thing, then that's what you agree with.
That would be right.
What's the standard of like, if everyone actually
Yeah. That's all everything that you guys have said is getting this effect, right? That you're not going to look into the mind of the individual. The natural idea is to have that there's a contract you have for the use of a word. You say, henceforth I shall bind myself to use the word blue only for things that look like this. And then you got something in your head. Yeah, there is the contract. And then getting it right is keeping faith with that contract. Yeah? And he's saying, forget that about the contract in the head. There is only something like this question. Are you using it the same way, in the same contexts, applying it to the same objects as everyone else does? That's all that right or wrong can come to. I mean, this is really a puzzling view, mind you, because, we are all taught that it can be a very brave and courageous stand to say it isn't right when everybody else is saying it is right, it's fine. You see what I mean? There can be one person against the rest, and that one person can be getting it right, and everyone else can be getting it wrong. You know, isn't that what happened with Galileo when he said it moves, the earth moves, and the rest of them were all wrong? But that, if this approach is right in terms of agreement, then the right thing to say to Galileo would have been, you don't understand. We all think it doesn't move. So that's the end of the story. That's what it is to be wrong, is to be disagreeing with everybody else. There is no other standard of right or wrong. So it's kind of a surprising view. But that gets the effect of saying we're going to look at the custom or practice, we're going to look outside the head of the individual. And if you agreed with what I was saying in the first section today, then there's no point in looking inside the mind of the individual. You've got to look outside. So the position so far is, when someone's using a sign correctly, when they're saying it moves or it doesn't move, and they're using the sign and they're applying it, and they're saying true things. They're saying this is brown, this is a chair, these are some people. Here is a light, here is a projector. You know, I don't see these are great insights, but these kind of basic uses of language, when someone's getting it right in these simple uses of language, that's not the outward manifestation of them having some inner state of grasping the rule, because there couldn't be any such inner state. Any such inner state would have to be explained in terms of the use of the word in the context of all these particular examples. So Wittgenstein's point is, there's nothing in the mind that tells you what's getting it right or wrong in the use of the sign. There are only, and here is this notion of custom or practice, that the use of the sign is located in. But this use of custom or practice, I think he doesn't mean quite the same thing as agreement. It is difficult to figure just what he means. It doesn't seem to be quite the same thing as agreement. As I said, that's very unintuitive, really, to say all there is to getting it right is agreeing with anyone else, everyone else. The negative point is that anything you might look at, if you think of what's going through your mind at any point, if you say, no, look, I don't buy this thing about locating it in a custom or practice or agreement or something like that. If you say, that can't be right, I know what I mean by the word is this. And you've got it in your mind, what you mean by the word. If you just think about anything that could be going through your mind when you mean something by the word, well, do it now. Take the word cube or take the word blue and you say, here is what I mean by the word blue. And you have some bit of flotsam or jetsam going through your mind as you say that. Well, what could it be? All it could be is some kind of interpretation of the sign, some other sign, a bit of mental stuff, an image of blue, the word blue again, some word in French. There's just going to be something going through your mind where you can ask, and now, what does that mean? Whatever it was that was going through your mind, you can ask, what did that mean? What was the significance of that? And then you need to interpret that. That already needs to be understood. It already needs to have a meaning. And how could that be? If you say, well, I understand that because I got something else in my mind that helps me interpret that, then you're going to be doing that for a while, right? Because everything that goes through your mind itself needs to be understood and defined in some way. I mean, here in the passage I'm about to look at, he goes back over this point here about this is blue or that's blue, or how you interpret the idea of the successor of a natural number. He says, how can a rule, when you have the rule inside your mind, how could the rule shoo me? I think he means show me. How can a rule, how do you pronounce that? Shoo me? Show. Yeah. Let's do it show. How can a rule show me what to do at this point? Well, whatever I do is on some interpretation of it in accord with the rule. That's like saying, when I get that x plus 1, I say, look, the rule is you add 1. Then actually, I can go 97, 104, 3, 2008. I can do just anything I like. And I'll say, yeah, on some interpretation, that's in accord with the rule, add 1. Or when you're giving the systematic thing, I say, well, whatever I do in some interpretation of the way you formulated the system, that's an agreement with that. And what he says is, this is not what we ought to say. It's not that the rule in my head is showing me what to do. We ought not to say that. It's rather any interpretation you can give, anything that's running through your mind that you use to interpret the sign, that still hangs in the air along with what it interprets. So the rule x plus 1 that might be running through your head, what does that mean? That's still hanging in the air. You no more understand what that means than you understand what the word successor means. So whatever I mean by the word successor, it can't be made to mean something by just me having the signs x plus 1 running through my head. They both need interpretation. And it is interpretation, when you define a term in some way, that doesn't determine meaning. And he says, well, in that case, anything I do, no matter what you say, you could say, yeah, that's the rule. I mean, I can say 97, 104, 3, 2000. I can say this is blue and this is blue and this is blue for anything at all. And I can say that's all in accord with the rule. Whatever I have going through my head, I can apply the word the same, whatever way I like, in the case of all these particular examples, and say, yeah, that's what I mean. Because the examples just drag the general rule along with them. The examples are what give the rule its meaning. It says, well, take the expression of a rule like a signpost. Suppose you have a signpost that says, I don't know, Dublin 104 miles. And you say, okay, well, that signpost can be getting things right or wrong. When the finger is pointing in a particular direction and saying 104 miles, the signpost can be getting things right or wrong. So what does it come to that you understand a signpost in a particular way? You know, you understand it as meaning Dublin is in this direction rather than that direction. And he says, well, what's the expression of the rule? What's the signpost got to do with my actions? What sort of connection is there between a signpost and human action? Well, maybe it's just this. You've been trained to react to the sign in a particular way, and now you do react to it. So that you want to get to Dublin, you see the sign, well, actually 104 miles is kind of long, but you go that way. You're driving along the freeway, you see the sign, you just do it. You don't have an image going through your mind, you don't have anything going through your mind at all. You just follow the sign. The sign says exit here, you do that. You just react to the sign. And then he says, well, maybe isn't that just giving a causal connection? That's just saying, if I see a sign in the freeway saying yield, I just yield. That's just causal. That's not what it really means to understand the significance of a sign saying yield. The significance of the sign saying yield, that's in your head, that's in your mind. And he says, no, going by the sign is not a matter of what's in your head. It's a matter of how you react to the sign, and not just how you react to the sign, but the custom, the regular use of the signs, the way these things are typically or ordinarily or customarily used. That's what he means by a custom, like a way of reacting to signposts. That's where the meaning of language comes from those customs or practices, not any kind of rule book you have in your head, not some kind of dictionary in your head. So for there to be such a thing as getting it right or wrong in your use of a sign is for there to be a custom of using the sign. And a custom of using the sign isn't a matter of mentally associating the right interpretation with the sign. So then the question is, what exactly does it come to, custom? What does it mean? What's he talking about? That's a central exegetical question about what's going on in these passages. What does he mean by custom or practice? Agreement is really a good, concrete, definite explanation. Okay? Everyone on board with Wittgenstein at this point? Can you put your hand up if you think this just sounds demented? Or at any rate, not very persuasive? Good. Right. Can you put your hand up if you think this does sound pretty persuasive? Okay. What about everybody else? You can't be both persuaded and not persuaded. Yeah.
I kind of see his point, but to the same extent,
Yeah.
then where does, like, how does the custom show up? Like, what makes it one custom instead of another? Like, what,
Right.
where, like, how does the custom begin and call, you know, for a yield sign to mean yield? How does, like, is it
Right.
you need some initial baptism or something?
You did initial baptism, yeah.
I don't know how to reconcile that.
Yeah. Well, suppose you take a simple thing like a pointing finger, right? If I do this, I mean, it's not that I have some special power. If anyone does that, right, there's a natural tendency to just orient over where the finger is pointing. Yeah, what about that? And even young children will do that. I mean, very young children, right? Just follow the direction of gaze. They didn't have a baptism. They didn't have somebody saying, now, when someone, infants do not get told, now when someone points and looks over there, you got to do that too. That's the target. That's just natural. Yeah. And in fact, when you think about it, pointing is one of the basic tools that we use in introducing language. Yeah. So there's that shared way we all react to pointing. It didn't come from anywhere. You know, it wasn't that the children have it laid down in a kind of highway code. This is what the pointing means. You use the pointing to explain other stuff. Yeah, you say this is blue and this is blue and this is blue. Yeah, and you depend on the pointing. That's a custom. We all react to the pointing finger in pretty much the same way. You can go right or wrong. You might make a mistake about where the point is indicating. But it doesn't depend on some mental interpretation of the pointing. There is just this shared reaction to a pointing finger. Physiological.
Like, it's just something we do, therefore, like, there's no other explanation.
Sorry, did someone? Well, physiological. I said you look at that place. Yeah, that's where right and wrong come from. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. I just realized the time. Okay, I was puzzled why people were getting restless. Okay, okay. We will continue with this on Monday. Okay, but that's exactly the question to be asking. Yeah. Okay.